Now for our story. This evening, after supper, Aunt Mary Lane's niece, Peggy Douglas, had put on her warmest coat and her galoshes, tied a bright scarf around her head, and run across the little path leading from the Lane farm to the Plummer home. It was snowing, a light, fluffy snow floating down lazily. Peggy liked the feeling of the cold air on her cheeks. Recently, she'd been so occupied with her personal, emotional life that she'd hardly noticed the beauty of the outside world, though ordinarily she was very sensitive to the changing seasons. But tonight, as she hurried along the little path, she suddenly felt more like her old self, carefree and useful. She stopped impulsively, rolled a hard little snowball, and threw it across the field with all her strength, the way she used to do when she was a youngster. Then, feeling a little foolish at this childish relapse, she resumed her walk toward the Plummer house. A moment later, Peggy knocked at the door, which was opened by her friend James.
Hi, Peggy. Come in before all the heat gets out. The house is just beginning to be bearable. Okay. Soon as I hit the snow. Oh, you're all out of breath. Did you run away? Oh, practically. It's wonderful out tonight. Oh, isn't it? I was out a while ago to get medicine kindling. This is the sort of weather we used to play for when we were kids. Remember that big red sled Randy had? Oh, do I? I doubt if I'll ever get much nearer to heaven than I used to be when Randy gave me a ride on that sled. It was called the Flying Dutchman. Randy was so proud. He used to paint it and wax it and fuss over it. That reminds me, didn't you have an accident one time? Yeah, I remember. Yes. I'll never forget it. Randy was so cross, wasn't he? He said it was all my fault. Why? What did you have to do with it? Well, I guess I was to blame in a way. You see, I asked him something, and he turned his head to answer me and lost control, and we ran smack into a big tree. It didn't bother me, but Randy hurt his shoulder. Only that wasn't what worried him. He was furious because we made a dent in the sled. He got over it, though. Oh, Randy's nice that way. He gets awfully mad, but then he forgets all about it in the next 5 minutes. Yeah. Well, for heaven's sake, what's the matter with me? Letting me stand there all bundled up. Here, give me your things, Peggy. I'll hang them up in the kitchen. Okay. By the way, Aunt Mary had a letter from Randy today. Really? What did he have to say? He said to remember him to you. Did he mention anything about when he expects to come home? Well, I think he said he might be home in a month or two, but he wasn't sure. You know how it is. Uh-huh. Oh, well, he'll certainly be home by spring. Don't you think so? He ought to be. Oh, I wish he were here now. So do I. Well, shall we go up to my room, Peggy? Okay. Where's your mother tonight? She went into a movie. Mother's crazy about pictures. She practically never misses one. Well, here we are. Make yourself at home. Thank you. Your room looks awfully nice, Jim. Thanks. Now, I'm dying to know the big news. I meant to ask you as soon as you arrived, but we got to talking about Randy, and I know, Jane. I know you forget all about me whenever Randy's name is mentioned. I do not. I just... Oh, Jane, that was really teasing. You're making me blush. It's becoming. It would take a lot more than a couple of blushes to make me pretty. Why, Jane, that's not true. You have a very nice face. Well, let's not change the subject. I want to hear that something exciting you told me about when you phoned. All right. But maybe it won't seem exciting to you. Well, tell me. I wanted to invite you to my wedding, Jane. Your wedding, Peggy? No. Then you still plan to marry Nicholas Dillon. Yes, Jane, I do. Oh, Peggy, my goodness. You don't have to look as if you've just lost your best friend. It isn't as if I'm not going away and... That's not it. But, Jane, I thought surely by this time you'd understand how I feel. That's funny. Because I've been thinking that surely by this time you'd have come to your senses. Come to my senses. Jane, Peggy... You remember our talk the day I went to see Dr. Lewis, and Kitt came in later. It's hardly possible I'd forget that day. Well, then, of course you remember what you told me about this. We said a lot of things that day, Peggy. Don't try to pretend to me. I know you too well for that. You know very well what you told me that day. You told me you were still in love with Bill Meade. Well, supposing I did. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with my marrying Nicholas. Peggy, how can you say such a thing? You can't mean it. But I do mean it. You mean you can sit there and tell me you intend to just cold-bloodedly go into a marriage with Nicholas? Knowing that you're in love with Bill? Well, it isn't as though I were deceiving Nicholas. He doesn't expect... our marriage is to be based on friendship, companionship. That's nonsense. Well, I don't think it is a bit. Just because it's somewhat out of the ordinary doesn't mean as if you're determined to go blindly ahead and hurt yourself even more. It's bad enough the way things are, but at least your life isn't messed up. And Bill's doing everything he can to straighten his life out. If you'd only be patient, wait and see. Be patient. Wait and see what, Jimmy? It just makes me sick, that's all. To see you deliberately throwing away something so precious, so rare. You love Bill. You know that he loves you. It's the most wonderful thing that can happen to a person, Peggy. If you only realize, look, Jim, I think I realize something that you don't. All this talk about true love. Well, I've seen how much true love is worth. Bill married Kitt me. Left me, Peggy. You know very well he regretted that. He's done everything he can to iron things out so that he can go back and rebuild his life somehow. You know that, Peggy. No, Jim. That's just it. What you don't seem to understand is that you can't go back. There's too much in between. Too much bitterness. Too many things to forget. So it seems to me there's nothing to do but to go ahead. Oh, dear, excuse me, Peggy. Hello?
Hello, Jane. Nicholas Dorn.
Oh.
Is Peggy there? I phoned the Lanes, and that Mary said she was with you.
Yes, just a minute. I'll call her. Peggy, it's Nicholas. Just a moment. She'll be right here.
How are you, Jane? Haven't seen you around town much lately.
I've been pretty busy. Here's Peggy. Thanks, Jim. Hello, Nick.
Peggy, I hope you don't mind my breaking in on you this way.
Why, of course not, Nicholas. I'm glad you called. What's on your mind?
I was wondering if you plan to be in town tomorrow.
Well, I hadn't thought about it, but I suppose I will be.
Well, I wish you'd make it a point to be, Peggy. I have something to tell you.
Well, why don't you tell me now?
No, I can't. Not over the phone.
But what's it about? Is it a surprise?
Well, it might be in a way.
I wish you'd tell me. You've got me so curious now I won't be able to sleep tonight.
I'm sorry, darling, but I'd rather not. I have to see you.
Well, tell me this much. Is it something nice?
Well, I think you'd better wait and decide that for yourself. Look, give me a ring when you get to town tomorrow. Do that for sure, will you, Peggy?
All right, Nicholas. I will.
See you tomorrow, then. Bye, Peggy.
Goodbye.
Peggy stood thoughtfully by the telephone. There'd been an urgency in Nicholas Dorn's voice, almost a note of desperation. She wondered what he had in mind. And in Wakefield, in his room at the Brown Palace Hotel, Nicholas, too, was standing with his hand still on the receiver, thinking.
That's the first step, anyway. I still haven't told her, but I just hope I don't get weak-kneed at the last minute. I've got to do it. Peggy's in love with Bill Meade, and he's in love with her. It'd be insane for us to go ahead with the marriage. I've got to tell her that. But can I? Have I got what it takes to look Peggy in the eyes, loving her as I do, tell her I won't marry her after all?
Nicholas Dorn was a very unhappy young man. He hadn't bargained for this when he first proposed marriage to Peggy. In fact, it was just this sort of emotional strain, the doubts and confusion, which Nicholas had believed it was possible to avoid. He kept remembering the words of that girl he'd talked to the other day. The girl who said, "Don't beat your head against the stone wall. Don't ever think you can make someone love you if that person's in love with someone else." Nicholas knew she'd been speaking the truth. But what he didn't know, yet, what would have surprised him very much, was the fact that the girl who spoke so wisely, whose advice had made him stop and reconsider, was Kitt Meade, the wife of the man with whom Peggy is still in love. Now for our story. I have something to tell you, Peggy. Peggy Douglas had wondered about those words which Nicholas Thorne had spoken to her over the telephone. Had wondered about the urgency in Nicholas' voice. But she dismissed it rather lightly because she couldn't possibly know Nicholas' state of mind. Only two people knew what he was really feeling, Aunt Mary and Kitt Meade. Nicholas had told Aunt Mary that he was in love with Peggy. Aunt Mary had asked him what he intended to do about his proposed marriage to Peggy, since the marriage had been planned as the theoretically perfect marriage, free of emotional disturbances, a marriage of understanding and companionship, and Nicholas, as well as Peggy, had denied any feeling of romantic love. Nicholas didn't know what he planned to do, although he realized his love for Peggy made a great difference. It was while he was in this state of indecision that he confessed his predicament to a pretty stranger. The stranger was none other than Kitt Meade, who had advised him never to marry anyone who was in love with someone else, because that was what she had done. She had married Bill Meade, knowing that Bill loved Peggy Douglas. She had hoped that Bill would forget Peggy, but it had been a vain hope. Even her treacherous plan to hold Bill by passing off Lisa Fenner's baby as her own had failed to change Bill's mind. He was determined to get a divorce. Kitt hadn't heard from Bill for some time, but she'd tried to be patient. Surely Bill would make an attempt to get in touch with her sooner or later. He wanted Kitt to apply for the divorce, but she had refused, and this Kitt knew would annoy Bill. Now, in her father's home, the pretentious 11th Street house in the little town of Wakefield, Kitt Meade hears...
Hello?
Hello, Kitt.
Oh, yes, Bill. I've been rather expecting to hear from you.
I have to see you, Kitt.
Well, Bill, you know where to find me.
But I'd rather not come to 11th Street.
You haven't seen the baby for days.
Yeah, I know that. Better than you do, maybe. But, well, I'll explain that, too, when I see you.
All right, Bill. But I think it's pretty silly for us to be meeting like a couple of accomplices when all you have to do is come over here to Dad's house. But since you don't want that, where shall I meet you?
Well, why don't we just have lunch at the hotel?
Oh, no, thank you. I don't believe in mixing dramatics and food, if you don't mind.
Well, all right. I don't care where we get together. You decide.
Why don't I just go out to your place?
Okay, that's what you want to do. Can you come about 3?
Yes. Yes, I'll be there at 3, Bill.
And promptly on time, Kitt Meade parked her father's big car outside Bungalow B of the Wakefield Auto Court. Went up the cellar stairs to the little porch. She dressed with exceptional care. There was something incongruous in the picture she made. Her expensive fur coat with a matching fur hat as she stood at the entrance of the shabby little cottage. As she lifted her gloved hand to knock, the door was opened by Bill. Hello, Kitt. Come in.
Thank you, Bill.
Want to sit here?
No, this will be fine.
Suit yourself.
Well, you fixed the place up quite nicely, Bill. The desk, bookcase.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of work here tonight, so I thought I'd better get things organized.
You mean your job for Uncle David?
Yeah. Just starting in like this, after being out of things for so long, I want to sort of brush up. Get back in the swing of it.
Oh, that's very earnest of you, Bill. You sound like the beginning of a Horatio Alger success story. By the way, have you seen Uncle David recently?
Oh, not for a couple of days. Yesterday I was out of the bank, and the day before he wasn't there.
I see. Oh, what is your job, Bill?
Farm loans.
Oh, come now, that doesn't mean anything to me. What do you do?
Well, your Uncle David feels that it's up to the bank to encourage the farmer to put in modern equipment and build up their farms. He thinks the whole community will benefit from it. So he wanted the man to give special attention to the bank's farm loans.
Well, that should be a natural for you. You went to agricultural college?
Yeah, I'm very happy about it. Why did you ask if I had seen your uncle?
Oh, I just wondered. I saw him yesterday. I thought he might have mentioned something about it.
No. Kitt, what I wanted to talk to you about...
Yes, Bill?
I wondered if you'd thought over what we discussed last time.
Naturally, I've thought it over. A lot. Frankly, I haven't thought of much else.
And did you change your mind?
Certainly not. I told you I wouldn't. I'm surprised that you even asked.
Well, the reason I asked, Kitt, is that I'm unable to believe that you refuse to look at the thing clearly, sensibly. It would be so much more decent somehow if you'd be willing to file for the divorce yourself, and that make it necessary for me to.
Look, Bill, don't talk to me about decency. It's a bit sick you're pretending to be so worried about the niceties of the situation. And speaking of looking at things clearly, what's wrong with your trying to see things my way? I might ask you if you've thought over what I said.
You mean about giving ourselves a second chance? Trying it for 6 months?
Yes.
It wouldn't work, Kit. Even though I do believe the child should have a real home and all that, I also feel that you and I wouldn't be able to make a proper home for him the way things are with us.
Well, you feel the way you always have, and so do I. It seems we've reached a stalemate.
Yeah, I guess we have. At the moment. But, Kit, the reason...
Oh, Bill, don't be so stubborn. I'll admit I've made a few mistakes, but I think you have too. Why don't we forget all that? Forget everything that happened in the past and start out fresh. We could swing it. I know we could.
No, it wouldn't work, I tell you.
It wouldn't unless you wanted it to.
Not even then. No, Kit, I still want a divorce.
This is beginning to be monotonous. I told you I won't give you one.
I'm giving you your last chance, Kit. I'm not going to wait any longer.
Oh, but I'm afraid you are. There's nothing else you can do.
You're wrong about that. You see, I went to a lawyer and I told him that I wanted you to get the divorce. He said if you wouldn't, I was going to.
You wouldn't dare.
But I would. Why can't you realize that I'm not kidding? I've made up my mind and nothing can change it now.
I don't believe it. I know you too well, Bill Meade.
Well, then I've changed because I mean every word of it. You call me stubborn. Well, Kid, I think you're being stubborn. Why do you want to hang on to a marriage that's all washed up? Why don't you face it?
Perhaps I have reasons you're not capable of understanding.
Oh, I'm sure of one thing. It's not because you're deeply in love with me. You couldn't be and say some of the things you said.
Oh, a woman says a lot of things when she's excited that she doesn't mean. Why don't you be honest about it?
I've gone overboard trying to be honest with you.
No, I think all this routine you've been handing me about our not being suited to each other is nothing more or less than a cover-up. A cover-up for your real reason for wanting to be free of our marriage.
By real reason, I suppose you're referring to Peggy.
Exactly.
Kit, one thing you've never been able to understand is that my wanting a divorce has nothing to do with anyone else. It's a result of our own differences, and that's all. But since you've insisted on bringing Peggy into it, we might as well iron that out right now.
It isn't that I've brought Peggy in. She's been involved in it from the very beginning.
Well, perhaps she has, in a way. You know that I've never tried to pretend about my feelings for Peggy. I've told you before that I'm in love with her. I always have been. And I'll tell you quite frankly that I wish very much that it might be possible when I am free for Peggy and me...
If, not when.
No, I mean when. When I'm free, I hope I'll be able to prove to her that I'm worthy of her love. She thought so once. Sure, I do want Peggy, but that's not the reason I want a divorce from you. Believe me, it isn't.
I think you'd have a hard time convincing an unprejudiced person of that.
Not if we knew the whole story. Knew the background of our marriage. And a lot of things that have happened since then. Not if we knew the part your father had in this thing. All the tricky, the devious, unscrupulous things we both pulled.
My. You're getting to be quite the rugged hero, aren't you, Bill? Strong language and everything. It's a pity this side of you developed so late in the game. I'd have enjoyed having you so masterful and strong-hearted. Been seeing any Tarzan pictures lately?
Well, at least you haven't changed, Kit. I doubt if you ever will.
So do I. I wasn't cut out to be the sweet, gentle type like your friend Peggy. But some people might think I make up for it with brains. Maybe that's why you're so smitten with Peggy. By contrast, she makes you feel like an intellectual giant.
Kit, you're just making things worse, talking like us.
I suppose in a situation like the one I'm in, Peggy would flit about studying sweetness and life.
No, but she'd make an honest attempt to find out how the other guy felt about the thing. Try to understand, to be reasonable.
Reasonable? Reasonable? That seems to be the newest addition to your vocabulary, Bill. Where'd you pick it up? From my uncle? Or maybe Aunt Mary? Surely not from Peggy herself.
Oh, look, Kit, this has developed into nothing but bickering. Let's end it. I've given you my honest decision. I've admitted that I love Peggy because she's a warm, generous, lovely human being. I've told you that I want a divorce. And there's something else I want, Kit. Something else I want, and I'm going to have. Is Bill going to tell Kit his decision? That he wants the child? If you do tell her, Bill, do you really believe you stand a chance of winning out against Kit and her father, Ben Calvert? Now for our story. Kit Meade sat stiffly listening to Bill's voice.
I'd sound honest to anyone who knew the whole story, Kitt. The part your father had in this thing. All the tricky, devious, unscrupulous stunts you both pulled. Sure, I've admitted I love Peggy, because she's a warm, generous, lovely human being.
Each word fell like a separate blow. It was like a bad dream.
She'd understand.
Was it really she, Kitt Meade, who sat there
How the
listening?
other guy felt.
She saw Bill, heard him,
Yes.
and yet beyond that immediate
I want
picture,
a
she
divorce.
saw another scene,
I want
composed of quick flashes. Herself with Paul Cromwell, with Lisa Fenner, with Jesse,
You were
and with Peggy Douglas, fighting, struggling, working to preserve her marriage to Bill by any means possible.
I don't love you. I love
For a
you.
moment, Bill's voice had become a blur, but
I
she
want a
tried to
divorce.
focus, to concentrate.
I want a divorce, Kitt. And there's something else I want. Something else I'm going to have. Kitt, do you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I hear you, Bill. Well, what do you want me to say? I'm quite overcome by all this Dutch courage you've apparently been getting from your various supporters.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, Bill, for heaven's sake. You know very well you've been running back and forth from Aunt Mary to Uncle David, being soothed, encouraged to stand up for your rights, or what you consider your rights.
Well, what if I have?
The point is you're not doing your own thinking. You never have. The funny part is that anything you hear at the Lane farm or the bank is gospel truth. Anything I say you distrust. You've always resented me because I'm stronger than you are.
What do you mean?
You hate to make decisions, so I made them for you. What do you think would have happened if I'd waited for you to make up your mind?
Well, for one thing, I never would have married you, I know that.
That's exactly the point. Just because I happen to know what was better for you than you did yourself,
Now, wait a minute. That's taking a lot for granted.
it would be obvious to anyone but you. What does little Peggy Douglas have to offer? Nothing. I can give you everything, money, position. With me, you'd be somebody in this town.
But I don't want to be somebody that way.
That's nothing but false pride. You throw away every opportunity that Dad and I can offer you just because you...
Just because I don't love you.
You could if you wanted to. I'm much more attractive than Peggy.
You knew I loved Peggy.
I knew you thought you did. Now, just because I did what any woman would do, used a few feminine tricks, tried to show you that I was more desirable than a simple little country
It
girl.
was a lot more than that. You tricked me into thinking that Peggy didn't care for me anymore.
It wasn't up to me to set you straight on how Peggy felt.
No. But going so far as to keep her letters from
Oh,
me.
don't be a fool, Bill. That letter was nothing but a schoolgirl prattling of love. Besides, it was too late to do anything about it then. Do you think I wanted to appear ridiculous before this whole town? No, Bill, it's all very simple. You resent me because I'm stronger than you are.
Perhaps you have been, but not now.
The thing that I don't get is, now that you don't have me to lean on, you turn to Aunt Mary and Uncle David. Only they tell you just what you want to hear. They both cheer you on about Peggy.
But you don't know what you're talking about. Aunt Mary knows Peggy has nothing to do with our situation, and so do you. I've told you over and over, Peggy isn't the issue between us.
Oh, no. No, Peggy has nothing whatsoever to do with it. You've just finished telling me quite bluntly that you're in love with her.
Sure I did, but I told you before, too.
Maybe I'm the old-fashioned type after all. I just couldn't get it through my head that my husband could blandly look me in the eye and confess to being in love with someone else.
Oh, don't twist things, Kitt. You know you're responsible for a great deal of this mess. I know I'm not entirely guiltless, but I'm not the heel you're trying to make me out. Besides, look at it from Peggy's angle. I'm married. I have a child. As far as she's concerned, we can skip the whole thing.
I wish I could skip it. I wish I could skip the last 2 years, ever since I met you.
Well, maybe you think I don't.
Well, you didn't call me out here just to tell me again that you want a divorce. You've been repeating that little item for weeks now.
No. As I told you before, a divorce isn't all I want.
Yeah, of course it isn't. You'd like to have Peggy Douglas all done up in cellophane and tied with pink ribbons, too.
Yet I never would have believed when I first knew you that you were capable of being so lacking in self-respect.
Well, live and learn, Bill. It's time you found out how the other half lives.
Well, kid, what I wanted to say was this. When you came back from California with the baby, it gave me an awful jolt at first. I mean, you'd given me a son. I realized what a lot you'd gone through, and you kept giving me this routine about what a fine life we could make for the child if we stuck it out. Well, for a while I was tempted to try and make a go of it. But then it dawned on me that you were just using the kid as a wedge. You didn't really give a hang about the baby.
You just wanted to use him as a means to make the marriage pay off. You didn't even have the normal, decent feelings about your own child.
Oh, what's all this leading up to, may I ask? I didn't come out here for a free analysis.
It leads to this, Kitt. I want the baby.
You what?
I want my son.
Oh, brother. You stopped everything.
It's not funny.
Oh, that's because you lack a sense of humor, Bill. Oh, I have a hand-painted picture. Just how would you propose to take care of an infant that age? I suppose you'd bathe him in the sink and carry him to the bank in a briefcase and keep him in your top desk drawer during the day.
Don't worry about how I take care of him. He'll get a lot better care than he's getting now. And a darn sight more affection.
So you want your son, Bill. I suppose you worked out a plan for what you're going to do about him?
Of course I have. My attorney will be
Look,
able to
Bill,
prove...
I'd advise you to forget all about the attorney and everything else. You're not going to have the baby. Ever.
But you told me that you wish you'd never had the child, that he's nothing but a nuisance to you.
Did I say that?
Oh, you know you did.
Well, I don't remember. But it doesn't alter how I feel about your charming proposition. Frankly, I'd never believed it.
Well, I can't see why you're so amazed.
Because, well, you've really lost your perspective. You can calmly sit there and tell me you've decided you want your child. Well, you haven't even been near the baby in days.
That's true, and for a very good reason, too. The more I see of him, the more attached I get to him. I wanted to stay away until I got this thing figured out, so I'd be sure that what I decided would be best for him. Not just a sentimental reaction on my part. Well, I am sure now. I'm positive.
You're crazy, Bill. Dad said you were, and I'm beginning to see that he's right.
But why are you making such a fuss about it? I don't understand you. You said you didn't want the child.
Well, even if I did, it doesn't follow that I'd let you have him the way you've acted. All this fancy story about not seeing the child because you get too attached to him, it doesn't hold water.
Well, if you won't believe me, there's no way to make you. But you're terribly wrong, Kitt. I care about the child very much. But what's more, much more to the point, I can't imagine letting him grow up in that house under the influence of your father. I won't let it happen.
If you really were so overwhelmed by paternal love, you'd try to forget your own personal happiness, what you think you want. If you were really interested in the child, you'd do what I wanted to do in the first place, live with me at 11th Street.
No, never.
That way you could be on hand to protect the poor innocent lamb from our evil influence.
If that were the only way, I might even go that far. But thank heaven it isn't necessary.
Oh, you're wrong, my friend. It's the only way. Unless you're planning something really underhanded. You're not by any chance planning to go in for child stealing.
Oh, don't be silly.
No, I'm not. I'm quite serious. I can't think of any other way for you to get the child. If I refuse to let you have it.
You're forgetting that there's a much simpler way.
I suppose you mean the law.
Yes, I do.
Well, I think you'd better do some heavy reading on the subject if you imagine the law can help you. You'll find that in a case like ours, the courts invariably turn the child over to its mother.
Not always. Not if it can be shown that the mother's not fit to have the child.
You couldn't possibly prove that.
Well, Kitt, there's no point in arguing that side of it now. I wanted to talk to you because I thought there was just a chance that you'd be willing to release the baby to me. I'll admit I wasn't any too sure. But I thought, considering that you told me you didn't want the child...
I see. Well, Bill, as a matter of fact, I'm beginning to feel all the stirrings of maternal devotion. Now that I know you'd like to have the child.
You know, I think I found out more about the sort of person you actually are in the last few weeks than I did in all the months we were together. You talk about that baby as if he was some sort of prize you got hold of, or some stock you were hanging on to in a rising market. It makes me ill, Kitt. Your own flesh and blood, and mine.
Yours?
I don't see anything funny about it.
Oh, if you only knew how funny it is. Knocking yourself out to save your son from the degradation of being reared by the Calverts. You don't think it's funny? Oh, no, you wouldn't.
But as Kitt Meade drove her father's car back home, there was no trace of laughter in her expression. She realized that Bill meant what he'd said, that he would fight for Lisa Fenner's child, which he believed to be his own son. Kitt couldn't let Bill have the child. No, she didn't dare let that happen.